We were happy enough with a basement that was dry and a good place for storage, but then one day creativity took hold and we decided to paint this floor to make it look like it was made of marble tiles. This faux marble is hiding a lot of stains and will be low maintenance. Last year we marbleized a covered porch outdoors, and this time we've marbleized the slab floor indoors. So here are some tips in case you'd like to do the same to your concrete floor. Here's a time lapse of the project. We used 5 colors of water-based paint and stain. We used a ruler, a pencil, baby wipes, a spray bottle, and a small stool to sit on to make it easy to paint on the floor so that you don't have to kneel. We used both stain and tinted primer to make the layers of details, and then we sealed the whole project with the best sealer we could find, professional grade. So this floor treatment will not wear off anytime soon. So here's the colors we used. The most important product we used was Behr concrete dye. The color was jungle moss. There's lots of other colors available. We used about 8 ounces of it, and then on top of that we streaked some of this Kilz Complete Coat in tropical foliage, and we also did some streaks in Waverly chalk paint, moss, and truffle. You can use other brands of chalk paint too. And after we'd done all that, we wanted to tone down some of the contrast. So we made a stain of black primer combined with green primer and about a cup of water. We'll show you the proportions of the paint later. Concrete has to have open pores before accepting stains or paint, so you want to wash your concrete once or twice with vinegar before staining it. Otherwise, the colors will just sit on top and wipe right off, or worse, if you let it dry, it'll peel off later when you walk on it. You don't want that. So what we did, we washed this floor twice with ordinary vinegar. Once we let it air dry overnight, and the second time we wiped it off with a baby wipe. So to make the marble look real, it's a good idea to paint it in smaller sections or tiles. So we drew our square tiles on this floor in random sizes using a pencil as we went along. And see, if you make it a mistake or you don't really like the tile shape that you've made, just wipe it off with a baby wipe and draw it again. It's like being a stonemason and cutting stones, except we're doing it with a pencil and a ruler and some paint. Once we had the layout of a square, the first thing we did was pre-wet the floor with this spray bottle. We like to use these boxes to organize our paints. It seems like they're harder to tip over than a can, so it keeps the workspace a little bit more easy to manage. And we also use nylon chip brushes. These are so much sturdier when you're scrubbing them into concrete for hours and hours. You don't want to use an artist brush. They're way too soft and wimpy. So you can kind of see the grain that we're creating with the stain. This is Behr concrete stain. And you just want to create a rhythm and some lines that are going in mostly one direction, but you can see they sort of cross over each other a little bit too. The main thing is to just color within the lines. We'd usually say, forget the rules, but in this case, you gotta stay in the lines. We're gonna paint the grout lines when we're finished, so you don't have to be perfect when you get up to the edge of a tile. But it's a good idea not to go too far over the lines. Here I'm using chalk paint to start creating a little more detail. Overall, these tiles look pretty good with just stain. You can see that in the tile at the top center, but then other tiles didn't seem to have enough detail, and that's why when we started layering in different kinds of chalk paint, the moss, and sometimes we'd use the brownish truffle paint. You can see some of that in the upper right hand corner, and we also used the Kilz primer in tropical foliage green, so it's sort of a moss green and a grass green combination with a little bit of brown thrown in. But even so, when all these were completed, about a quarter of them looked really good with just the stain, a couple of coats of stain. But others just didn't look like they had enough layering. So that's when we created the paint stain. So what is this thing that we're calling paint stain? Well, in this case, it's a tablespoon of black paint plus a tablespoon of green paint and about a cup of water. So we mix that together, and it's going to be transparent enough so that when we put it on these tiles, you'll still be able to see the details below it, but it's going to tone down some of the tiles that are a little too busy looking. Whatever surface you're marbleizing on, water is going to be your best friend. That and colors that harmonize together. But look at all the different techniques we tried just to make some of these tiles look pretty good. Here's a lot of water and a little bit of brown chalk paint. And here's moss colored chalk paint and a lot of water and a baby wipe. There was so much water going on here, we actually had enough to try squeezing it out and splashing it on the tile next to it, like this. What do you think? Does it look like real marble? I think it does. And you can even use paw prints. That's purely optional, but we like them. Eventually, you get to the point where you're ready to put in the grout lines because that's when this floor really starts to look real. We used a brown chalk paint. We used paintbrushes that were 1/2 inch to 3/8 of an inch round and tapered, and we just swept the paint along the lines where the grout was going to be. We think the brown looks more real than the white, but maybe that's because the white can be very glaring and in your face, where the brown sort of fades back. Here we are. You can see how you can drag your pinky along the floor as you go. That adds some stability. And you can even reach across and hold your elbow with your other hand, and that adds stability. And if you make a mistake, just wipe it off with a baby wipe and keep going. You can still add layers to your tiles. Here's a cool technique. We dipped a 2-inch brush into the paint stain, dragged it across the surface, and twisted it as we went. This added a really nice curvy detail. You can add some straight lines next to this, but it's kind of cool to just sort of twist it and do a random crisscrossing lines that converge, and just play around with it. Here's one more look at what this horrible floor looked like before we painted it. When we had it looking this good, we went over it with a really nice product called Cover Seal. I'll leave a link to it below. And now we can walk on it. You know, the first time I walked on this, it looked so real that in my mind I thought the tiles were going to pop off the mastic because it hadn't quite dried yet. But not only did it not do that, because it's actually paint, it dried so quickly that we could walk on it pretty soon too, and we love it every time we go in this room. See you next time.